Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Sign of the Time. Good to see you tonight. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for allowing us to come into your homes, your place of business, wherever you may be tonight. We are here tonight with a very special broadcast, a very special show tonight, one that is, uh, just let me say it like this, one that is historic, a historic show tonight. Why is it historic? Because we are not just welcoming those of you that tune in tonight via Facebook, but we are now simulcasting and being seen live, not just on Facebook, but YouTube at the same time. So for the first time ever, we're able to say good evening to our Facebook and YouTube watchers tonight. I'm excited about that because we're able to reach more individuals, able to get this message of hope and direction in our teaching. And tonight, what promises to be a power packed show tonight, we're able to reach more individuals. So I'm excited about that. I want to remind you to stay safe tonight. Stay safe when you go out. Watch what you do. Wear your mask. Please, we need you. I need you. You are a part of the Sign of the Time family. You're not our friends, you're our family. I want to say thank you to our guests on last night. I'm telling you, Bishop S. Janine Hyman just sent us into a fit on last night. A tremendous show. It was so powerful. We had to re-air it earlier this afternoon. And so tonight, I'm just, again, pardon me with my excitement. I'm super excited about the fact that we're going live on two different, I'm just excited tonight. Head to the YouTube channel, like and subscribe our page tonight. I want to challenge you to do a couple things for us. I want to challenge you to hit the share button, hit the share button, hit the share button. Just share it. It doesn't hurt anything. Just hit it so that other people can see this show tonight. Tag a friend, tag someone. I'm ready to get right into it. We've got so many of you on the line here. I'm ready to get to my guests. Before I do want to, we're waiting on one of our guests. We'll be here in a minute, in a moment. But before he comes on, I want to bring back to Sign of the Time two gentlemen that are always with us. I was joking with them offline, telling them that they are on here more than I am. And I don't understand how they weasel their way on here again tonight. You all know them. They're regulars. Dr. David Walker in the center of your screen. Bless you, Doc. And Dr. Stephen Gardner, who is also with us. My other guest, Quasi Francis, just checked in. We'll get him in a second. Before I bring him onto the scene, I do want to. We're gonna jump right into this subject. No preliminary. We're not gonna do a whole lot. All of you have been on here before. I do want to tell all of our viewers what we're going to talk about tonight. We're all reading and we're going to discuss something that's going on in America. We know we've got the coronavirus on the rise, but yet we're dealing with not just issues with police and all of that. We're dealing with racial tension going on, and we're reading. We've all read and looked at this book. That is very powerful. The book, as you see on the screen, is called White Fragility. And White Fragility by Robin DAngelo, it talks about why white people don't want to talk about racism. And the unique thing about this book is that it was written by a white lady, female, to whites. So it's not like it's one of us talking to them, it's them talking to them, and we're just listening in, if that makes sense. All right, we're going to bring our.
What you just said? Hello?
How you doing, sir?
How we doing?
I think
I need a.
All right, there you are. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
All right, everyone hear each other.
we're here.
We're here. All right, welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us tonight. This promises to be a power-packed show tonight. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the conversation tonight. And so I don't know. I guess we joke about it. I'm going to get out of the way and let you guys talk about it tonight. And I guess Dr. Walker might get a good laugh out of this, but I'm thinking that we ought to start with the old head in the group. And I know he doesn't want to say who he is, but we'll start with the old head in the group.
Wait a minute. You have to talk about Dr. Gardner. Yeah, well, yeah, I happen to be the older brother.
That's okay. That's a great position.
That's the older brother.
Yeah.
The older brother. All
The
right.
older brother. We're all equal, but I'm
We're
just.
all equal, but we're gonna all right, let's yield to the older brother tonight. Dr. Gardner, that book is the book is powerful. The book talks about racism from a standpoint of a white female talking about why they don't want to talk about it. Talk to us about what's going on with this issue from their view for us, because we know how we see it. What did you get from it? And you guys just jump in. Just jump in. I'm not gonna call on you. Just jump in.
I think the term white fragility is alarming, especially if you are a white person that's hearing that for the first time without really understanding the message that Robin is trying to convey. Let me first of all give you a little backdrop about Robin, because a lot of people don't know who she is or where she's come from, but she's an academic, a lecturer, an author, and has been a consultant and trainer on issues of racial and social justice for more than 20 years. Mm-hmm. She formerly served as a tenured professor of multicultural education at Westfield State University. And one of the things that's mentioned, it's a pull quote, and it may have been written by either, maybe it may have been written by her, but here's the pull quote. It says this. He says that in this groundbreaking and timely book, anti-racist educator Robin DAngelo deftly illuminates the phenomenon of white fragility, referring to the defensive moves that white people make when challenged racially. White fragility is characterized by emotions such as anger, fear, and guilt, and by behaviors including argumentation and silence. She went on to say, these behaviors in turn function to reinstate white racial equilibrium and prevent any meaningful cross-racial dialogue. And so, and she talks about how this white fragility develops and how it protects racial inequality and what we can do to engage it more constructively. So it's really not bashing per se, but it's an enlightening dynamic, especially through the lens of someone who is a Anglo-American and that's actually looking at, the dilemma that exists within their culture as to how they have, through their perception, protected their positions of privilege.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Walker.
Well, this was a great book to read. I've had it for a couple of years, or maybe not that long, but I know I've had it in my library for a while. And when I first heard about it, I was really intrigued by what I believe she's a doctor. I know she's a professor. I believe she has a doctorate, so I'll call her Dr. DAngelo. When I first looked at it, I first had to understand what that word fragility meant.
Okay.
And what it means is it's the quality of being easily broken or damaged.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Again, the quality of being easily broken or damaged, or in other words, fragile.
Fragile, right.
And what makes a white person fragile? And that's what she's talking about. And that's why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism, because once you start having real deep-rooted conversations about what is racism, what is white supremacy, what is whiteness, what is white superiority, and you begin to have not necessarily challenge them on these issues, but have deep conversations about them, they begin to get fragile about it. They get weak. They get emotional. And usually the response is to be defensive, to fight back, to push back, because they don't like the characterizations, because many of them feel that that's not who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know, that's not me. But she's not necessarily throughout the book trying to point a finger. She's really trying to enlighten whites to understand the reality of white superiority, whiteness, just the way things are, and how they are privileged in many spaces.
Brother Quasi Francis rejoined us. We hadn't heard from him. We were talking about the book, White Fragility, and Dr. Walker just made an interesting point that the word fragility comes from the word where we get fragile. Do you think, Quasi, that you would think that they think we're the fragile one? Is that why a lot of times they tell us to get over it? We shouldn't be looking back at what's going on because of their fragility?
Sure. And first of all, I want to thank you guys for having me on the show. Good evening, brothers. It's an interesting topic, particularly this book is. To answer your question, the short answer to your question is yes. You always hear, particularly in the white supremacist structure, whenever you have any complaints about it, that we're practicing victimhood, that you need to get over things that happened a while ago. I think the term fragility in her book probably hits close to that. And I ducked out for a minute. I'm sure you guys have addressed it. Sound like I got towards the end of what was being said, and I would agree. This book isn't for us.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for Black people.
Right.
This book is for is by a white woman addressed to white people. I heard the word enlighten white people about white supremacy and white superiority. That's when I jumped in. I got back in. I could not agree more. Now, there's definitely a certain criticism of the book.
Mm-hmm.
It takes away agency from Black people. We kind of sort of don't have any sort of self-determination, correct? We're pretty much on the whims of what white people want to do. That's one of the criticisms that has been levied at the book. The other one, of course, being that it limits white people into kind of sort of a box of you're racist, and no matter what you do, you'll always be racist. You have to understand that. I think it's been juxtaposed against Kendi X's book, which kind of sort of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, gives white people a reprieve. Kind of hey, like you can be racist, 1 hour, but the next hour by doing A, B, C, D, and E, you can be anti-racist. And it really depends. It's kind of malleable. Like you aren't just are or you aren't racist. It's kind of sort of a spectrum that they go in between. But yeah, I think the title, the fragility part, is the big part. The idea, the conversations that I'm sure you brothers have had. I know I've had probing conversations with white people where it really doesn't go that far because it ends up going back to the same kind of sort of playbook that's being dismantled by Black Lives Matter now, right? Concerning, well, that was the past. I didn't have anything to do with that. What are you going to do? You got to fix your own community first, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's really good in dismantling kind of sort of that defensive white force field that comes up with whenever you're talking about race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to quote something that Michael Eric Dyson, I think most of us know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
Or what he mentioned, he did the foreword on the book, that we're talking about here. And he says DAngelo bravely challenges the collapse of whiteness into national identity, no less an authority than Beyonce Knowles recently remarked. Quote, "It has been said that racism is so American that when we protest racism, some assume we are protesting America.
Mm-hmm.
And DAngelo proves that Beyonce is right, that the flow of white identity into American identity, of racist beliefs into national beliefs, must be met head on with a full-throated insistence that what it means to be American is not what it means to be white, at least not exclusively or even primarily. So I think that, and we could, you mentioned Black Lives Matter, and boy, do I get a lot of pushback from some of my white evangelical friends about believing in Black Lives Matter. When I say Black Lives Matter, I'm saying that my life matters.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Last time I looked in the mirror, I think,
Yeah.
without beyond the shadow of a doubt, that my hue identifies of my African ancestry. And I can tell you what tribe I'm from, but we're not going to get into that. My point is that I get so much pushback about the Black Lives Matter to where they try to denigrate the actual movement and the point by referring back to some things like, well, they're anti-American, they're not patriotic, going to the knee thing,
Yeah, I was going to say Colin
from one
Kaepernick.
knee to the next knee,
Right.
we got two knees.
Mm-hmm.
We got the knee of Kaepernick, and then we got the knee of our brother that just lost his life. So it's two knees, and yet we're told to just kind of just not deal with that at all. But it's a pushback that says, I don't want you to get loud, but I want you to get over.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get loud, get over it. I'm saying subtly that I want you to assimilate to our view of what it means to be an American.
Mm-hmm.
And our view, it's just like telling an Italian man that comes over and immigrates over here, be American, but don't be Italian. Come on, talk to me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like telling a person from Asia to come over here, be American, but don't be Japanese or South Korean. Come on. Why are we the only ones that are told that we come over here that you cannot be African, even though your citizenship is American? Something is wrong with that line of thinking. That's why it's so directed toward us being wrong about being African and American, and it's not wrong for anybody else to identify with whatever their ethnicity. I think that's part of my angst, but I think that's what the book is getting to.
It's rooted in that same history, right? The idea that those groups that you mentioned, for lack of a better term, you can talk about the economics about it. They chose to come over here, right?
Right.
And part of our, and lack of a better term, making us more docile and being subjected to, the institution of human chattel slavery. One of the things that had to happen was an erasure of that Africanness, right? And they did it through religion, through the elimination of certain rituals, through certain symbols that we had. So the idea that we need to get over it is kind of sort of that we is like you talked about. They're not talking about Black people. That everything is incidental of Black people, which is why it's a lot of what we're seeing with the Confederate symbols too, as well, right? When the president says those are our heritage, that is our history.
Wow.
Who's he talking about? If he's talking about the collective country, then it's a part of history, certainly not our history, but it's a part of American history in the sense that this was a group of people who rose up against the country to protect the institution of slavery, which they not only wanted to hold, but if they were victorious in the war, intended to expand into Mexico and the Caribbean, places where it had been outlawed either by European colonists or just by the people themselves. So the need, I think that what you talk about and how we're to get rid of our Africanness, I think that's purposeful and an extension of the colonialism that goes back to slavery, right? Think about it. Like you said, you can trace yourself back to the tribe that you came from. I did that work also, but it was work. Whereas I have white friends who they know their great grandparents and their great grand. It's part of the history. Like they didn't lose that when they came over, when they chose to came over here. We were forced to come over, and in part of that force and loss of culture, like we had to be stripped of that. So I think the stripped of Africanness. So I think that's a part of the conditioning for sure, the assimilation that you talked about.
Dr. Walker, what chime in about something that she mentioned in the book? I mean, if you want to continue to talk about that, go ahead. But I want to talk about something else with the book.
I want to concur with Brother Quasi. It is about the stripping of identity. See, everything resides in your identity. Your black maleness is in your identity. Africanism is in your identity. Who you are is in your identity. And they know that if we could just strip them of everything that they know, then we will have them right where they want. So when people talk about systematic, that's why it has been so effective for 400 years, because it's systematic. And that's why, as Brother Quasi said, a guy like the President of the United States, he is not global at all, because if he's global, there was no way he would have used the term this is our history. That's not everybody's history.
Not at all.
You know, and but so he's a part of that culture. He's a part of the systematic process. That's why he can, stay on the fringe, because he knows who he's talking to, because he's got to keep them happy.
Right. Dr. Walker, you said something. You actually hit what I was going to talk about, like you in my notes. We talked about stripping the identity. What Brother Quasi just said. When he was on the show last week, he and I talked about that stripping of your identity in the term of assimilation.
Right.
And when he was on the show, I don't know what he's done to his head tonight, but last week he had everything.
I got the covering on.
He had everything.
He got a mask on his head, man.
I got a mask on my head. There you go.
Well, when he was on the show last week, he had everything flowing, and I had on a nice button-down dress shirt.
Okay.
Well, I've mentioned this, and I broke it out tonight that I had to wear my colors tonight.
Okay.
And he talked about how society wants us to assimilate to fit in, which is a part of, would you guys not agree, stripping us of our identity?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Dr. Walker, go ahead.
And also redefining our identity.
Right.
You strip us, and then you redefine it for us, because we all grow up trying to be like them.
Right.
Trying to, because whiteness has been established as the marker or the barrier to achieve, or how we identify everything. We base it on, what they quote unquote has established. What is success, or what is wealth, or what is whatever. They have redefined what how we should think, and I think that that's one of the critical issues with Black America, is that we've allowed them to redefine how we should think, or redefine our identity, I should say.
And Quasi, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Did I pronounce your name Quasi? Okay. Last week, as you said, you had your hair down, and was very ethnic.
Right.
Very
that would be the term.
Very depicting.
Yes.
Yet some would be uncomfortable with that portrayal of Americanism.
Yes.
Right.
And as if you have dreads, or if you have what's labeled as nappy hair, it's not good hair. I mean, I was raised, and I know that there were people in my family that said, oh, so-and-so got that good hair.
Yep.
Wait a minute. I think everything that God made was good. So if so to say that so and so's hair is good because it's straight, and so and so's hair is bad because it's nappy, or so and so's hair is radical because they have dreads. Who is labeling that?
Yeah.
And didn't we
Yeah.
try? Don't mean to cut you off, Dr. Garner. Did we try earlier in years back, whether it's men or women? Now we have some sisters on here. You sisters, because of the number of guys, it's difficult to pop your comments across the screen because it'll probably take up all the faces. But you can comment below. Then we try to do that by processing our hair. Were
Yeah.
Oh,
we
yeah.
subconsciously?
Oh, yeah.
I
What
know
were we thinking?
yeah,
We still do it.
it's easier to comb, it's easier, but were we subconsciously trying to fit in or become or blend? Or
Exactly.
when we blend, we're passing. Were we subconsciously trying to meet their standard of what success is?
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Their standard, or should I, because see, some white people would take an offense to say their standards if we're talking about them. But let's say the standard of systemic racism.
Yeah.
Is that a better way to put it?
Sure. That's how I
Or
would
is
put
that am I dumbing it down a little bit?
it. That's how I would
I'm
put
just
it.
keeping it real. But
Yeah.
there's a standard that says this is the way you people, we've heard that before,
Mhm.
have to be accepted. Now, there's some responsibilities. I can't go on an interview with bagging and sagging. We talked about that. I mean, you just gotta come correct. I mean, especially if you're going to work in a world that has that dominant influence, or has a dominant standard that everyone in that status quo has accepted. And
Yeah.
so there are things that we have to do on a responsible scale. But getting back to the standard bearers have said that this is good, this is bad, this is acceptable, that's unacceptable. But none of those things apply to anybody else except those of African descent. It doesn't apply to the Jews. It doesn't apply to the Asians. It doesn't apply to those who come from India, Australia, or any other place. It only applies to us. Why? That's my question. Why are we told how we have to be, and yet the others are not told that they got to line up like us?
One of the comments that was posted is by Doug Perry that says that one of my friends had dreads and went for a job interview, and he had been growing his hair for 15 years, and they made him cut it off.
Not me.
See, I mean, those kind of things, as far as I'm concerned, are wrong. Why would a workplace say that your hairstyle is unacceptable?
Right.
Yeah.
That's like going to a workplace and say if they only accept people with hair, then I don't have any hair, so we can't accept you because your head is bald. I mean, whatever the case it might be. So, who gave us those labels?
Right.
I can certainly answer. We should just come out and say it, and it's really what the centering of the book is about. It's what both you doctors have talked about concerning our history and the stripping of identity, and why there's certain standards imposed on us that aren't imposed on other people. The standard in the United States of America is white, straight, male. Anything that's where that's
You mentioned
what
that in the book.
that's where everything starts from. The further away you are from that, the more questionable or the more you are to be reviled. So who's next in that hierarchy? White, straight, female. That's the second. That's the closest they can get to. That's the closest that's gotten to the standard, the prevailing standard in the country. And why we can see that, or it's often questioned that, well, why are you about this? Like, you're treated poorly also. but that proximity to that standard of white straight male will often get you further in life than standing apart.
Mhm.
Now, for those of us, for the brothers in this forum, for a lot of the sisters watching, we don't have that luxury. There is no comfort in even trying to adapt to those standards. I'm sure you guys have talked about Candace Owens, or will talk about Candace Owens. There is no protection for white supremacy when you aren't white. And I think that's why this book is important,
Mhm.
because it's white people saying, hey, we're the problem. We need to address it, because I know you like you brothers say you're older than me. I'm 38. I'll be 39 in a month. And I know you guys have been going at it longer than I
Oh
have.
boy.
He's
But
double walking.
we
He's a
know,
baby.
we know
Before you came
we've
on
had
here,
these
Quasi,
conversations.
before you came on here, they were calling me the baby. So now I'm calling you the baby.
We've had these conversations. You guys have had it with your constituencies. You've had it with your congregations. It We know what the situation is. I feel like with anything else, you get more of the message when you hear it from somebody who's a member of your tribe or a member of your group.
Let
And
me
I think that's why these protests have been so effective
Let me
also.
interrupt you, Quasi. I
Mhm.
have to interrupt you while you have the mic. Let's talk about because you said something almost like a totem pole. You said that there was a level. Who's at the top of that pole?
In America,
Right.
as far as who controls and runs everything, oh, the numbers
You
are
said something
the
about
numbers
the
are
female, the white.
yeah, the numbers are staggering. It's
No, I
the
mean,
numbers are staggering. We're
no.
as a
What I mean,
society, we are. Go ahead.
what I mean is, you said something about the female, the white male, the black. If we broke down the black male, the black female, the white male, and the white female, who's at the top of the chain?
Oh, I mean, I think before you get us, I think I would probably go white male at the top, white female, then I probably go white LGBT, white gay, and then I would probably go who. So we still have, and we're getting it. We're kind of veering out. We're veering into straight racial politics now when we're talking about
Yeah, she
hierarchy.
mentioned that. Yeah.
Um, if you're looking at that, after that, I would probably say we still, as Black people, have more power than Latinos, even though Latinos have greater numbers, only because of our voting block. The Black voting block, you're getting 90% of who we are, no matter who the candidate is. I
Okay.
think it's been between 66 and 90% since Grant. Like we vote in a big block, and like that's our because we're voting for survival
So is
oftentimes.
the
So
black male, who's on the bottom, the black male or the black female?
we're probably ahead of Black females and Black LGBT as far as societal standards are
Right. That's
concerned.
what. Right.
Yeah,
Dr.
as far
Walker.
as societal standards are concerned, we're looking at, for instance, even crimes and transgressions that are happening that have been pointed at racism. It's generally been Black male victims, right? We kind of sort of ignore or subordinate Black female, Black LGBT victims.
Okay. Dr.
So I
Walker,
would say
do you have?
we're out of 9, we're probably like 7. Go ahead.
How would you rank that hierarchy, Dr. Walker?
Well, I wasn't going to rank it, but what I am going to say that Brother Quasi just gave us the ingredients for oppression.
Mhm.
Because once hierarchies were established,
Yep.
that was the ingredients for oppression and over authority and rule. Because remember, there is no such thing as race.
Yep.
The only race is the human race.
Mm-hmm.
And why do we have different races? Because it's not biological, it's a construct. It's a man-made construct. And for one purpose and one purpose only. That's for power and authority. So, yeah, it may be, and Brother Quasi left a couple things out when he talked about white straight male. Don't forget Christian and wealthy.
Yeah.
If you add those two to that white straight male, now you got another power, another power.
Yeah. And you can even go further, right? Like East Coast, Boston to DC. Like there's you can break it down even further demographically.
Sure. But that's the ingredient. That was the whole purpose of these hierarchies, because it is expressly to show dominance, power, and authority and control.
Absolutely. And it's not going to end. And I'm going to let you brothers take it after this, because you have it. Like, it's not going to end. There's a historical basis to it. And it's not going to end until we're in the times, until we address the racism, right? Bacon's Rebellion, we saw Native Americans, white people, and Black people all working together. And then as a result, all kind of sort of rising up against the ruling class, talking about taxes, treatment, boundaries, and things of that nature. Once that rebellion was suppressed, everything had to be racialized, right? Native Americans, Black indentured servants, white indentured servants, Black slaves, a few white slaves. Everything had to be racialized at that point in order for treatment, and we've lived with that ever since. Ever since. Even W.E.B. Du Bois, right? He wanted to go the kind of, and brother was talking about the global route. He became a communist. He was a socialist. And what was the one thing that he derived from that? This will never work because the white proletariat, the white worker, is racist against the Black proletariat, the Black worker. Until we address the racism, and that's my biggest issue with the kind of sort of Bernie Sanders, AOC, far left progressives. You can't ignore race. Like, I understand the class argument. I understand the argument. It's even where MLK went towards the end of his life, right? It's more class than race. But you cannot, in America at least, you cannot address the issues that people that aren't in power have unless you address the racial aspect first. You have to. It's where it draws from.
Dr. Gardner, there's something she mentions in the book I'd like for you to try to address and kick us off on this part of the conversation. She mentions the term white racial equilibrium.
Right. And she mentioned the term white racial equilibrium is to identify that they're already at a place to where they're comfortable. This is our reality. And so to say that, for a person of color to say, or anyone to say that you're racist, their natural response is going to be, well, I'm not racist. I have friends that are not racist. I have friends that are Black. So they fall back to that. But what she was emphasizing is that sometimes they get defensive. In fact, she gave this one particular story, situation where she had went into, she was early on in her career, and they called it, instead of multicultural training, was called diversity training or something that she mentioned. And she mentioned that there were whites that came to the meeting and they were mad because they got to do this. And one person said, look, they're going to take things from us. I mean, it's just that, why were they so irate about pointing out the need to, understand and how to relate to someone that doesn't look like you or talk like you or have your same mores or your same verve? We have a tendency to have a higher verve, which means when we get excited, we raise our voice, and some people are intimidated by the sound of a Black voice. And so, so they have to resort back to this white equilibrium so they can feel like that they are in a position to where, okay, I'm okay to be right here. So therefore I don't have to stick my hand out, or it's okay right here, but being okay right here means what? In many cases, she pointed out, is being silent.
Yeah.
Okay, got you. You know what? That's something I thought about today. that you said that, Dr. Gardner. It made me think about something that I wanted to bring up. And your last comment, I want to do this little, I guess you experiment. I'm from Philly. Love my Philadelphia Phillies. All right, Dr. Walker, can you repeat this statement after me? Can you say that the Brooklyn Dodgers are the best baseball team to ever live?
Can I say that?
Yeah, can you just say that? Just repeat that.
The Brooklyn Dodgers are the best baseball team that ever lived.
Okay, all right. If I don't dispute what he said, aren't I agreeing with him?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If he just said that and I don't say anything, aren't I saying I agree? So, and my point is, you just said that silence is agreement.
Silence is agreement.
Yeah,
I mean, and why should I get involved? We could talk about this from the whole standpoint of the Good Samaritan. And we want to bring it back to the church. Look at the Good Samaritan. Number one, let's talk about the good. Can I just do a little quick biblical?
Go ahead.
The Good Samaritan. First of all, the Jews and Samaritans, they didn't get along anyway.
Mm-hmm.
The Samaritans were considered outcasts or half Jews. Yet Jesus made an example of a good half Jew, somebody who was always looked down upon as having done the right thing, that performed an act of justice on this person that they found on the side of the road. And the person on the side of the road, he was broken, he was bruised, and he was battered.
Mm-hmm.
Yet the priest saw him. I ain't getting my hands dirty. I'm trying to get to church. So he goes across the street. A Levite, another religious person saw him, and I ain't getting my hands dirty either. So in both cases, religiosity had separated them from doing the right thing by somebody else. So not doing something is also what? It's also subjugating this person to further oppression. But the Good Samaritan picked the man up, bound up his wounds, took him to an inn, did everything he could, and said, look, if there's anything else, he told the innkeeper, if there's anything else, come back and get me. I'll sell up the bill when I get back. Trying to show a point of sometimes the people that are leading the way are considered to be less than, are considered to be, not the standard, not the people that are looked up to, but yet they show the best example. And as in terms of acts of justice, and I think that that's one mantle that people of color really have, because we understand what justice looks like, because we have experienced injustice.
Yeah.
And so in many ways, we're leading the way to try to set the example to our white beloved brothers and white beloved sisters. This is how you take care of those who are marginalized, poor, blind, and naked.
Dr. Jeremy Thompson posed a question. Either one of you guys can jump on it. He says, we have prayed and protested. We've met and marched. We have strategized and made plans. Why has there been such poor dedication to the execution?
Well, my point is that the planning and has to be from a united front. This the planning and the execution has to be from not just people of color or those who have experienced the oppression, but you got to have allies. You got to have people that make the voice of injustice louder than the color of our skin. To say that it's beyond just an issue of Black folk problem, but it's an American problem. And you can't have that unless you have allies that are willing, that don't look like you, that may not talk like you, but are willing to say, hey, look, we've got an issue. Let's deal with it.
Yeah, but Dr. Gardner, our guest last night said this, and it's something I've been thinking about all day. they're coming to be an ally. They're coming into our neighborhoods to march with us, but they're not saying anything in their communities.
Well, she did make that a point, and I think I responded to that today. I think, and I said that it's easy to go into a what I would call a safe place to validate
Mm-hmm.
and show solidarity.
Right. Absolutely.
And to take that same response to the people that are going to resist it.
Right.
And so that's what this book is about. This book is pointing to the community that really needs to hear it.
Right.
But that this is, I mean, it's not an easy answer. It's not an easy solution, but at least one step in that direction towards healing is going to require allies. It's going to require people, okay, we got to do something about it. We got to own it. And that's, I think, another issue too, and is that have America really owned its problem?
Go ahead, Dr. Walker.
I was going to
read another question after.
When Barack Obama became the president, the first black president of these United States of America, there were people who thought he was going to be able to turn around 400 years of great oppression. He had 8 years in the office, but if you put things in proper perspective, it really only had 2 years, and that was his first 2 years of having his team. When he had a Democratic Party, in the Congress, maybe in the Senate, as well as the White House. But years 3 through 8, he had pushback.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right?
Right.
You're all right.
So basically, he only had 2 years to turn around 400 years of oppression, because when he left, people would say, well, what did he do for black people? Well, let me ask you, what are you going to do in 2 years? You know what I'm saying? So I say that to say this: while some things today, especially with white allies, some things are moving forward, but the struggle is still long. The struggle is still deep.
Mm.
We got to keep pushing, because, and I don't want to spend too much time on this guy, but you don't have an ally in the highest office because he's counterpointing everything you do.
Sure. And
as long as you keep getting that kind of backlash, you're going to still keep having struggle, keep having fight. So, let's vote him out in November.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'll move a little bit further.
So, and before you move on, Rush, I just want to echo what both the brothers said as far as change and why it seems to be ineffective or at least slow moving. Just from a historical perspective, like, this is the way the system is designed. Also,
right?
It took civil rights. I mean, it really didn't start, till post Reconstruction. So we're talking 80, 90 years, right? If you really want to start with Plessy and go towards the Civil Rights Act of 1968, labor rights, 40, 50 years, women's rights, Seneca Falls to 1920 was 60 years.
Right.
Even gay marriage, Windsor was 77, and they got it in 2015. So what is that, 40 years?
Right.
So these things take time. What happens on a national level also is harder. And what the brothers were talking about with politics, particularly looking at Obama on a national federal level, like, that's hard. But what we can see change, and where we've seen change, and what we saw in the civil rights movement that eventually developed federal, were things happening on a local level. And you can definitely have a more dramatic impact as far as the change you want to see in local politics. So I would encourage, I know I don't have to tell you, Dave, because you've already done it.
Yeah.
But I would encourage all of our listeners, people who are watching, run for office, get involved in a campaign, start organizations. If you don't want to do that, starting an organization or getting involved in an organization that will push your local representatives, because that there isn't a clause in the Constitution that calls for revolution. That was purposeful. Even though we're lock and Hobbes as far as the idea of power coming from the people being given the government to rule over us, there is no mechanism to overthrow this. So whatever system we work under will probably be under the Constitution. So we have to know how the game works. And the game says locally you can make things happen.
Absolutely.
Federally, nationally, much, much harder.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. I'm thinking, another point that I want to make is that, we're dealing with a mechanism.
System.
And this mechanism, if it's in place, when one party elects their president, he's got to try to either take apart that mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, does it matter which party pushes their candidate there if the same mechanism is in place?
Right.
I mean, we watched this. I'm sure all you guys that watched that movie. It's on Netflix now, called 13.
Yeah.
And it showed a mechanism. And it showed when it went from a Democratic president to a Republican president, the same mechanism was in place.
Yeah.
From a spiritual standpoint, this mechanism is a snake. It just happened to have red and blue gills. And so unless we can deal with the snake at its root, how are we going to have change? So in other words, part of this changing is not only going to require to the voting, but it does require a level of spirituality.
Yeah.
Because that's what gave the civil rights movement, or the freedom fighters, whichever you choose to call it, the power that they needed. That movement came out of the church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would venture that all major civil rights movements in American history have had some rooting in the church. Even with Windsor, even with the gay marriage, like, they really didn't cross the threshold until there were churches, there was scripture was saying that we actually aren't doing the Christian thing by not recognizing these things. So there has to be spirituality involved. Otherwise, what's tying us together? What's tying all of these disparate groups? What are we doing this for? And you can actually make an argument that the lack of spirituality, I have an affinity for a lot of the Enlightenment philosophers. They were old white people, but they kind of sort of had an idea of how people worked. It starts from there. And so, and again, I'm not a dogmatic, scriptural kind of a person, but at the same time, there has to be a spirit, there has to be a light, there has to be something greater that's guiding us if we truly want to go towards the egalitarian society that now our white allies say they want us to have.
Let me interject here, and Dr. Walker, you mighty quiet, so I'm gonna get you with this one because I got my can of worms I want to open up.
No, he said something. Get my thoughts together on. But anyway, go ahead.
Isn't there because I don't know which one of you said something about the foundation that the church's involvement. Here's my can of worms. Isn't it difficult for the church to really be effective in the civil rights movement if the church is saying that? When I say the church, let me clarify. I mean the black church, the African American church, who has always been front and center. All of our civil rights leaders were rooted and grounded in the church, and we had a strong Christian force. Isn't it difficult for the black church to stand up and say we're behind this movement? We're behind the movement to turn our nation from what we call red to blue. If we're pushing our Democrats, because of you feel me? Yet and still, one of the things that we forget is on the platform of the Democratic Party is the LBGT community.
Mm-hmm.
But yet the church is standing back saying we don't agree with that.
Right.
How can you say you don't agree? I don't know whether I open that can of worms or whether
You definitely opened it up. Go ahead.
How can you? So ask the question. How you don't agree with the platform?
How can you say? How can the black church say we're moving forward, civil rights movement, and we're behind our party. We've got to get who's in the White House out, different party, but yet part of our party's platform is to support the LBG community, but the church is not going to support them.
Right. So
Go ahead.
So by and large, we know that primarily the black church votes Democratic.
Right, and that's my point. If primarily the black church is voting Democratic,
Right.
part of the Democratic platform is to support the LBG community. And aren't we wrong to say, because I'm just talking from a personal perspective now,
Right.
having family members
Right.
that practice a different lifestyle than I practice.
Sure.
I still love them and tell them I support you. I may not agree with that lifestyle, and that's just my preference, but I'm not going to bash you
Right.
or your choice.
Right.
You
Well,
have a right, and I will die defending your right to live your lifestyle, just like I would expect you to die defending my right to live my lifestyle. But yet and still, as a church, we pound on that community, but then turn around and say, I mean, you guys feeling me?
I understand what you're saying.
I definitely feel you. I think that how do we look at the love of Christ? Because remember, I on my podcast, I had a conversation with a young lady, and so I'll, shameless plug right here.
I did not know that was coming.
You can go to iTunes and watch Beyond the Culture podcast with Dr. David Walker. Or you can go to my website, beyondtheculturepodcast.com, and you can watch all the episodes. But I just interviewed a young lady, and she was talking about how Christ has love for those who are on the margins, those who are of society, who are marginalized, oppressed, overlooked. And I think that as people who are Democrats, and mostly those who are in the black church, yes, you stand up for your righteousness. Yes, if that's your party, you stand up for your party. But you do have to show the love of Christ regardless of how people are. Right. And so you said it best. You said there are things you just may not agree with people, but to tear them down, to throw them away, to throw them out,
right.
It's not the love of Christ. So it is a balance, but it's the party. That's where people stand on. And I think that you can be, if you are a Democrat, I think that you can support the Democratic Party. And even though it is the liberal party, you can love people for who they are and where they are.
Anyone else want to chime in on that?
I do. Chime in on what he just said, and from a broader context is this. Yeah, a united front is going to have strange alliances or peculiar alliances. Let me put it like that.
Mm-hmm.
If we have a common problem, we need a united front. Now, there's an old African adage, a proverb, that when a weaker tribe had an enemy, they would go find a stronger tribe that had the same enemy and cut a covenant.
Mm-hmm.
And they became a united front.
Mm-hmm.
If the united front is racism, hello.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If the united front is this mechanism, then we need to have all alliances coming together because we're dealing with a social issue.
Right.
We're not talking about a religious issue per
Right,
se.
right, right,
We're
right.
talking about a social
A
issue.
social, right.
Let me give you an example. Early in the early 2000s, I lived in Indianapolis, and we had a HIV/AIDS program, and I was part of the Ebenezer Baptist Church Foundation there. We had acquired a huge grant from Robert Wood Johnson Foundation out of New Jersey. And the purpose of the grant was to increase counseling and testing in communities of color. And so one of our challenges, because we wanted to weave within the church, because at that time, Indianapolis had 40% from that particular time of new HIV infection. And there was a vector, and that vector had to do with, you can't hear me?
My daughter just logged on. I was just waving at her.
Oh, okay. All
I'm
right.
shocked. I'm having a heart attack.
Okay.
My daughter's
All right. So anyway, so we had a challenge. We had to be able to tell. Our goal was, because we got this grant, was to do outreach in the community. That is, get Black folk tested, because they were ones that were coming up hot. Come on, talk to me. They were the ones coming up, infected with the virus, and eventually that morphed into AIDS. Then if they already had the virus, we got to, make sure they get into, some sort of care coordination, some kind of wraparound service that provide them more than just social things, but, medical things as well. Our biggest challenge initially was the Black church.
Yeah.
Because part of the HIV/AIDS outreach and protection had to do with advocating that people would use a condom.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to push people to use a condom as a person of faith is almost to say that you're supporting promiscuity. Yet at the same time, some of the lifestyle of your choir directors. I'll leave that alone. You know what I mean? I'm calling like it is.
Right.
So what we had to wind up doing is change it, take away the religiosity that was associated with the problem,
right,
and call it a public health issue. And so sometimes in changing the languaging that's associated with something, you gain acceptance. At that time, boom, we had 75 churches that signed up and was on board because we pointed out as a public health issue.
Wow.
And it's funny you would add that, doctor. You see my wife, she was telling me the DSM-5, they're now trying to classify racism as a mental health issue. Boom. And if you think about it, probably makes sense. And piggybacking what you're saying, like, it would probably make sense. And that would probably break down some of the barriers of some of the traditional organizations that are resistant to that. That's a really good point you made. I actually didn't connect the two until you just said it. Yeah, they're definitely trying to make racism literally the DSM-5, the big manual of, mental disorders.
APA, yeah.
But go ahead.
No, go ahead. No. I'm just saying that, sometimes is that as someone that was in the military, for 20 plus years, I'm in a foxhole. I don't care what you are.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Can you shoot a gun?
Yeah.
Can you shoot a weapon? The enemy's over there. I don't care what you are. I don't care. As long as we are together and we're achieving the goal that's in front of us and not get distracted by these side issues or deflecting issues from the real thing that's in front of us. Because it's so easy to get pulled away and distracted. We say Black Lives Matter, then here comes the distraction. All lives matter.
Dr. Walker, what is that term that you used? We use it on the show about indifference.
Indifference?
Yeah. We were talking about preference. You and I mentioned this one time. We were talking about an indifference, but where I preference one over another.
Yeah. Well,
no, that wasn't it. It was when I support you as long as I benefit from it.
Convergence.
What is it?
Interest convergence.
Interest convergence.
Interest
Right.
convergence.
We talked about that. I couldn't think of it. Right.
Oh.
So
That's
right.
when those who are of the white community will do something that benefits Black people, but they're getting something out of the deal as well.
Mm-hmm.
What's in it for me?
So so there's something in it for me. I'm doing it for you because you need it, but there's something also I'm benefiting from. So that's interest.
That's a kickback.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, talking about what you guys were talking about, mental health issues. Can you imagine if racism was classified as a mental health issue? Can you imagine the acts that could be done?
Yep.
Well,
it would completely change society.
Well, look, let me tell you, one of the things that they did, you can go back and look in the 60s and look at DSM, was it 3 back then?
Yeah, I think it was.
DSM 3, they listed homosexuality as being deviant behavior. Then when you come down to DSM 4 and 5, you know,
they changed it,
and took it out.
It changed the whole outlook of legislation for the people for the whole 9 yards. Because
you can't legislate deviance.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know,
can you legislate? Okay, going back to our church issue, can you legislate what the church is saying is a sin?
I mean, legally, constitutionally, no, you can't. I mean,
and the reason why I asked that, doctors, and the reason I asked that, because we seem to, according to what Dr. Gardner was saying, we have a difficult time drawing this line between sin and social issues.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. That's true.
You look like you were trying to say something.
Well, a lot of behavior has come under legal, constitutional obligation. So let me say that again. Let's take like adultery. At one time, it was into the courts. You could be arrested.
Mm-hmm.
How about this? How about interracial marriage?
Yep.
Right.
They legislated that.
Right.
So a lot of things, and homosexuality was under legislative laws too. So you can, to answer to your question is sure, you can always.
You can. You can.
And it has historically. Laws have changed, especially the marriage laws, what was that? Loving versus Virginia.
Yeah, but guys, can you talk about LGBT, the homosexual community? A mother that has a homosexual son isn't going to stop loving her son anymore.
No, absolutely not.
I mean, I'm sorry, going to stop loving her son any less.
No,
because he lives that lifestyle.
Absolutely.
If we're saying we're part of Christianity, which is love, and one of your foundational scriptures is how you're going to be recognized is by the love that you have, we should love. It's just like murder. I will never tell anyone to murder someone. Matter of fact, it's against the law to murder someone.
Right.
But everyone still has that right. You have an opportunity to murder whoever you want. I'm not going to tell you to murder them. I don't know whether that point made much.
I got you. Yeah.
You're talking about the freedom to say it as opposed to doing it?
I'm sorry?
You're talking about the freedom to say that, to have those thoughts?
Or the freedom we all live in a society where we have the freedom to do. When I say to do what we want, we don't technically have the freedom to do it because you're going to have to pay a penalty for it. But there's no one actually holding your hand all day saying, don't murder someone.
Free will is definitely a thing. I know I don't have to tell you, brothers. Like, free will is definitely something that we've been endowed with, something that we can act upon. I think, and both the gentlemen, they've hit the nail on the head. I'm in total concurrence. I think there has to be an understanding of a separation between morality, ethics, and a political platform. And again, I know we didn't want to talk about the guy in the White House, but he was able to get just enough people on a platform that they were united enough to win the Electoral College, even though they are diametrically opposed on a bunch of issues within that platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he was able to get white evangelicals on board with a platform that included divorce and adultery and
Abortion.
abortion and all sorts of things, because he was able to convince those people that the judges that he was going to appoint, the political appointments he was going to make, would benefit them. So the
Right.
united front that Doc was talking about, I think, is crucial. And also knowing that beliefs and acts are things that can be legislated, but our whole system is based upon the general welfare, the general will of the people. So things that would be considered taboo, and
Yeah.
I'm chronicling history of the country through landmark Supreme Court cases.
Mm.
Things that have been taboo, like, were not, like, literally within the decade. Like, 1989, you had, for example, 1989, you had death penalty completely legitimate for juveniles
Mm.
and mentally disabled. By 2002, that was done. No death penalty for juveniles mentally disabled. So over the course of 13 years, our whole thought process, our whole outlook on an issue that was, a lightning rod at the time, completely changed. And now you don't hear about that anymore. Now it's over, right? We don't think about executing mentally retarded
Yeah.
people. We don't think about executing uh, criminal offenders under the age of 18, where before that was a huge lightning rod issue. So we do have the power. Remember, and I would stress it, as the people, we have all of the power. We grant a government that we give government authority to kind of sort of not lord over us, but to collect us, to gather us. But the power is ours. We just give it to them. And it's important that we always remember that.
You know, I think that one of the challenges that we have in America is that we have compartmentalized, society, politics,
Mhm.
religion, and business. You
Yeah.
know, and we have our religion, but that's over here. But then my politics is over here, and my business affiliation is over here. You go into some other, cultures. You know, Islam was one of them.
They're all connected.
It's all one.
Mhm.
What applies to one applies to the whole
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
thing there. You look at the Old Testament and the Israeli community, Israel, as it were. Their laws kind of govern every aspect of their life, and it was not segmented. I'm going to have my worship over here. In other words, justice was in every area. Over here, we have a constitution that says one thing, but this constitution is put together by people who did not consider people of color as being a full human being,
Or
three-fourths of a man.
women.
That means that one-fourth we're a beast, and
Mhm.
so, or whatever the case it might be. And so we were never considered to be part of that. But yet at the same time, we're saying that we are a Christian nation and we're founded on Christian principles. One of the reasons why people in Islam, and I'm talking about overseas Islam, are so hard on Americans is that we're such a hypocrite about
Yep.
one thing that we say and one thing that we do. We say one thing, but we do another.
That's
And
right.
when they see someone that converts from Islam to over to Christianity, they see them as becoming an American
Right.
because in their worldview, it's all one.
That's
And
right.
so, but we struggle with that here. And I think that's the complexity of what we're talking about at this juncture in the conversation, because on the one hand, we have a systematized, racism
Mm-hmm.
that even the constitution makers,
Mhm.
have purported that this is okay to have.
Mm-hmm.
That, yeah, we may abolish slavery, but then let me just keep that in check. Let me keep that mechanism going by
Mhm.
instituting Jim Crow.
Mhm.
And so you begin to the mechanism, it stays in place. And until the mechanism is dismantled, then and then rebuilt a new one that, it doesn't matter who's in the Oval Office. If the mechanism in place,
right.
You know what I mean?
That's
We can
what you
have
were
the
saying,
same
Quasi.
problem all over again. Go ahead.
Yep. That's what you were saying. Go ahead, Dr. Walker. Look like you were itching over there.
Somebody said the other day that McDonald's doesn't make the best hamburgers, but they got one of the best systems ever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a system. Wow. So all you're doing is changing the parts.
The manager.
Changing the manager.
If I can go back to Barack Obama, 400 years of a system, and then you take a black man and put him at the top of a system after 400 years, and you expect him to make a change. It's impossible.
Right.
Oh boy,
wow. That was good. That's good.
That's the system.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, we've been on here well over an hour and I'm approaching 90 minutes almost, but we did say we're going to do 2 nights. Same time tomorrow night?
Absolutely.
All right, same time tomorrow night. Let's pick this up and let's finish this tomorrow night and let's go deeper into it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, my brothers.
All right,
take care. See everybody tomorrow.
All right. Same time tomorrow night. All right. I want to thank my guests tonight, Dr. David Walker, Dr. Stephen Gardner, and Quasi Francis for joining us tonight. It was a wonderful, wonderful time that we had. We really got into some good stuff. We didn't really get. I wanted to save some for tomorrow night. We're going to do that same time tomorrow night, 8 o'clock tomorrow night. What I want to challenge you all to do is not only hit the share button. I do want you to hit the share button and share this. But what I would like for you to do between now and when the show goes off in a few minutes, I'll give you some time. Pose some questions or a topic or something that you want us to talk about tomorrow night. The book that we read, the book that we have been reading, the book that we went over tonight was entitled White Fragility. It's talking about how this white woman talked to white society about the struggle of blacks. We didn't get into a lot of things that we wanted to get into, such as those individuals that are blending or that can pass. She made a very interesting comment in the book. She said that it's very interesting that a person that is biracial, that has a black mother and a white father, or vice versa, they are multiracial. And they can pass. It's funny how a person, not of my complexion, but a lighter complexion, can actually pass for a white person. But you never hear of a white person passing for a black person. We're going to talk about that. There was an instance when that did happen, and it really caused up a big ruckus when that happened. There was a big stir about a white female that spent a lot of time posing as a black female. You may have heard about it. We're going to talk about that tomorrow night. So pose your questions, share, hit the share button, do a watch party. Let's talk about this in the watch party. Support us at Eagle Austin so that we can keep coming back to you and doing shows like this. Tomorrow night, we're going to be right back here. On Thursday night, we're going to have Bishop Leonard T. Smith of Independence House of God in Crystal River, Florida. Will be here. Friday night, we're trying to get a special guest on. If not, we'll do it. I may just come on here myself. I'm not sure, but we'll do something Friday night as well. Need your support to help us keep coming back. We're going to talk about this and we're going to strategize and move forward. I want to thank you all so much for spending time with us tonight. Every last one of you that are on here tonight, it means so much to me. It means so much to me that you have taken the time out of your schedule to sit and listen to us brothers talk about these issues tonight. I love all of you, from those of you that I don't know personally on here, all the way down to my brother who pops on and to my daughter that popped on here tonight. It means so much to me. It means a lot that my daughter sees enough in me to come on and watch Dad talk about something. Listen, when you go to bed tonight, I want to challenge you one more time. Look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself this question. Did I do something to make society better? Did I do something to make the world a better place? Did I do something to leave a legacy behind for the next generation? Did I do something to bridge the gap between all of this tension? Did I do something to make someone's world a better place? Or did I simply waste another day? Tomorrow, don't waste any time. Work toward your purpose. Work toward who God birthed you to be. You were born for a reason. You were birthed and you're here for a reason. Do that tomorrow and the world will be a better place. I love you so much and there's nothing you can do about it. Don't forget, when all is said and done in your life, when you're finally finished and you shut your eyes for the last time, no mistake that you made will define you. It's the things that you did positively. It's the things that you did good for this world that define who you are. We'll see you tomorrow night with our panel. We'll be right back here tomorrow night at 8 o'clock p.m. for Sign of the Time here on Facebook. And to our YouTube audience watching live tonight, we'll see you on tomorrow night.